Hi everybody, this is Carmen Geddes and welcome to 10 Sisters TV. Today, I think we're finishing up our Quilted Jacket Series. Now, I might be throwing in a few other little videos and shorts. And so just as a reminder, if you want to get all the videos that we are making, we'd love for you to subscribe. And if you click the little notification bell, then if we do add more videos, then you're going to find out right away. But what we've tried to cover through all this Quilted Jacket series is, I think I would describe it as basically confidence building for you to have the confidence to actually make a garment from a pattern. And so I want to go over just a few different things that we are doing on these jackets. One of the things, this is the main jacket that we've been working on for this series, and I've added a collar to this jacket. And so the jacket pattern that I'm using is actually a very basic pattern. It's the tamarack jacket. We will actually put a link to that pattern at the bottom of this video so you can see. But the whole point is that we can alter these patterns. This jacket I've definitely made longer. So what I did is I found a collar pattern in a different, I found a collar pattern in a different jacket pattern. And I did measure that length of that collar. I added a little bit of length to the pattern so it would fit around the neck of the pattern that I was using. So I just want to make a couple of little observations when you're adding a collar, because here's another jacket that I just am finishing up. And so on this one, this jacket pattern, this is a different jacket pattern that I'm using, and the pattern did come with a collar. And so in this pattern, it came with a collar, but it had like a front of the collar, and then it had a facing. So traditionally, if you were going to make this jacket, there would be a facing piece, right? And so, but what we've done is the lining of our jacket, essentially we've quilted all the fabric and then we're cutting out all the pieces. So it's a good news, bad news, because what you're really doing is you get to eliminate several of the steps. And it makes this collar, it's hard to follow the instructions on the pattern because we're not doing a facing, because our jacket fabric is already quilted. We have an outside and an inside. So just with all of that, what I want to just show is that essentially what you're doing is this jacket pattern where the lapel is going to fold back. You know, when I'm wearing the jacket, that lapel will open. I did bind the collar piece first. So I did the binding on the outside of the collar, and then I sewed that collar piece onto the jacket. And then what you'll see is that then when I did the binding all the way around the whole outside of the jacket, then I just did that binding all around the inside neck, over the top of the collar piece and the jacket. And so that binding is on the inside. Now it was just a tiny bit tricky here. Instead of doing a continuous binding that's going all the way around, that would be an option that you could do. I decided the simplest way, I thought, was to bind the collar piece, and then when I did the binding all around the whole thing, I just did a separate little binding. So then when the lapel opens, you actually have like they're like two little separate, but I still think it looks really cute. I thought this was a hair, and this is invisible thread from my binding. Anyway, so this is one way to finish this, and which I thought was really fun. And then on this one, This collar that I added on this jacket was just a little bit simpler of a collar, but I basically just, when I wear what am I trying to say here? When I'm wearing this jacket, the lapel is not necessarily going to be laying open. It's more of a, kind of a closed front, and then it's got a collar coming out. And so on this one, I did exactly the same thing. I bound the collar, sewed it onto the jacket, and then I'm sewing my binding all the way around the whole quilt. But when I'm wearing this quilt, it's going to be a little bit different look on the front because the lapel's not opening out. So anyway, options. It's all about options. At the end of this video, I will show you a quick little demo on adding piping before you bind. So this is a technique I use a lot with my quilts. Another video that will be the link at the end of this video, under this video, will be a link to my full machine binding class that is done chapter by chapter. There's a whole chapter on making piping and adding it to your quilt before you bind it. It's a great finish, and I just love it. So on this jacket, I just did it just to the collar. And so the next thing that I want to talk about on this jacket, so I've actually have sewn my binding all the way around the outside edge of this. I already did the binding on the sleeves before we sewed those sleeves up. And so the sleeves are all sewn. And so I have sewn the binding all the way around. So what I want to show you is the option of adding a zipper to your jacket. Now you absolutely can make your jacket, let me just lay it down this way. So you absolutely can make your jacket and add the binding to the edge, and you are done, right? And that is fantastic. I have found, maybe because I've been wearing these jackets in cooler weather, that I've just kind of like having a zipper. On this jacket that I showed you here, I'm actually going to be putting in a couple of buttonholes and buttons, and so maybe that'll be a little short video that we'll add later. I just think it's kind of fun to throw in some different looks. Now this jacket right here, the pattern is the tamarack jacket, very basic front back sleeve, which is kind of what I recommend if you are new to sewing garments. And you'll see that it's just a really fun little basic jacket. It does come with instructions for this nice pocket, but if that is complicated, you can add a patch pocket, eliminate the pocket, whatever. And so this is the original jacket, and I use the same pattern on this jacket. So you can see that this one, I added quite a bit of length to this jacket. I just wanted to make it more of like a little overcoat kind of a jacket, and I've added the collar to it. So I hope this gives you a little confidence to branch out a little bit. And so the next thing I want to show you is adding this zipper. And here's a little trick, because sometimes zippers can be a little bit intimidating, especially to a garment. I will tell you that when I finished this jacket front, the length of this was just over 29 inches, and I found that if I got online and went to Amazon, I was able to find a nice nylon separating zipper, and I was able to just choose the length in inch increments, and so I was able to find a 29-inch separating zipper. So when you're adding a zipper to the front of a garment or your jacket, then you definitely want a separating zipper that's going to come apart at the end, right? It's like a jacket. And here's my little trick for you, and that I just thought this is a super easy way to put in a separating zipper, have it be nice and accurate. I have sewn the binding on the front edge of my jacket with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, just like I would if it's a quilt. I have done the technique where I have pressed that away from the front, making this nice and flat. I've turned it over. I pressed it nice and flat from the back side. I do this technique on every project that I bind, no matter what it is. And before I fold this over and sew the binding down, this is the step where I'm going to add the zipper. And so again, if it's a separating zipper, I highly recommend getting the length of zipper that you need. If you happen to have a zipper that is too long, of course, then you would take the length, shorten it from the top of the zipper, right? Not the bottom. The bottom is where you're going to hook the two pieces together and zip it up. But I love when you can get a zipper that is the length that you need, because it's got that nice little stop, a nice little stop tab up at the top. Again, nylon zipper, very easy to work with. But with this technique, you could do a nice metal zipper if you want, because we're not sewing through the zipper teeth on this technique like if it was a bag. And so if you want to do a metal zipper, then that's totally fine too. So we're going to lay the zipper right sides together. So the right side, or the front of the zipper, to the front of the bias binding. Okay, so the binding's sewn on, and so this is the folded edge of the binding, and I'm going to lay the zipper right sides, and I'm basically matching up the outer edge. Now I can see just a little bit of a whisper of that binding where I'm laying the zipper, but basically I'm matching up those edges. The top tab of the zipper I have folded underneath on the right side, because when we fold this out, then that tab is going to be out of the way. So the tab is also folded under onto the right side. So I'm not just folding it down, I kind of fold it over at an angle, so you can kind of see that. So that is folded over at an angle. So we are going to just secure this. Now, one thing with zippers is we don't want to stretch it. We don't want to stretch that binding, but we do want it to be laying taut. I don't want a lot of gap, because the reason why sewing the zipper on, did I say that right? Yeah, sewing the zipper on, we basically want it to end up at the same place on both sides, because it is a two-sided zipper. So I am unzipping this partially, just makes it a little bit easier to manage, and putting these clips. Now you can do pins, definitely. What I find is these clips are really easy to adjust, and the pins kind of distort it a little bit, because it has to go in and out. So I have just found that these clips just help me to be a little bit more accurate. So you'll notice that the end of the zipper is just about 1/4 inch from the very edge, so you're gonna, make that determination when you measure your jacket. So I would say overall my zipper is a 1/4 to 3/8 inch shorter than the actual full length of my bound jacket front, if that helps. Okay, so I've got that on, and so now we are going to, I'm going to move my sewing machine over here, and I'm going to, I have my zipper foot on. I'm going to move the needle position so it is over, not exactly right next to the teeth, but about 1/8 inch away from the edge of the teeth, and I will show you what that's going to look like. I'm gonna find my foot pedal here, and we'll probably speed this up right. So what's happening when I place the zipper, let me just move it over just a little bit more. We'll see how, I'm not sure how this is going to show up in the video. So you're just going to have to believe whatever I say. So when I have this under my zipper foot, the edge of the foot actually butts up against the zipper teeth. Every zipper foot is actually going to look a little bit different. And so then we are going to move our needle position, going over the other way. You know, every sewing machine is a little bit different, but this is a really great way for you to practice. And so I would say that your needle position, like I said, you don't want it to be exactly right up next to that zipper tooth. And so to me, the best gauge is keeping the right side of the zipper along the edge, the folded edge of your bias. If you find that zipper shifting around, that's really where you want to look and where you want to focus as far as the placement goes. And I have this just on a regular stitch length. I'm going to do just a little bit of a back stitch. And let's support this jacket the best. There we go. So I'm going to support the weight of your quilt. So to me, that's a big part too. And you'll notice it, well, maybe you won't notice, so I'll just tell you that the edge of my zipper is just right along the edge of the binding. The edge of my zipper foot is butted up against the teeth of the zipper. And we're going to finish sewing this zipper all the way down with a little back stitch at the end. Okay, so now that is sewn on. So what I basically wanted to show you is that when you sew the zipper on to the front of the binding and you wrap it around, essentially what you're doing is you are leaving basically a 1/4 inch binding showing, if that makes sense. Okay, and so then we are going to finish. I'm going to you can either clip or tuck the edge of this zipper, you know, out of the way, get that out of the way. But then we're going to just continue binding this jacket. So notice that I had already, let me lay this flat so you can see, I had already, you know, when I sewed the binding on, I had squared away that miter. And so then we're going to just continue binding this down now. After this is all sewn down, in my previous video, I was showing you, so I probably am going to hit this with the iron and some steam, right, to get that to lay nice and flat. And so in my previous videos, I have showed you that I like to do a little thin line of glue on the back edge, and that is how I'm sealing the binding down. But when you're sewing a zipper on, we're actually going to do both. So I would actually do a little bead of glue for the zipper and heat set that down, and then I would do a little line of glue for the actual binding. And then I will come in with the iron and I will heat set that in place. And then the way I like to sew my bindings down is I'm going to do a stitch in the ditch foot that has the guide down the center with invisible thread on top and matching probably my zipper right at this one, because it's going to be stitch right on top. And this is actually going to sew the binding and the zipper down at the same time. And so then I'm going to just repeat this on the other side and follow the exact same. Keeping in mind, when you do sew it on the other side, you want to make sure that you are matching up where they start at the top and where they end at the bottom, where the zipper starts at the top and the zipper ends at the bottom. And so I'm going to be a little more slow, a little more careful with making sure I've secured the top and the bottom of this second side of the zipper onto the other side of the jacket, just because I want it to start and stop in the same place. Remember, we're working with fabric here. So I'm assuming my jacket front is the same length on both sides. But because we're working with fabric, sometimes things can just shift and move a little bit. So when I am adding this zipper, sewing the zipper on, then I just want to double check that I am securing the top and the bottom in the same place where it starts and stops on the first side that I sewed it. So hopefully that made sense. And then the other thing that I just want to mention is, I've showed you how I like to sew the bindings down, but you could certainly hand sew these bindings down. And another little thing I'm actually going to do on this jacket, I haven't done yet, because because of all this fun piecing of the stars, I did not want to add a pocket to the front. So I'm actually going to add a nice patch pocket on the inside of this. I'll do a little short video showing how I'm going to actually sew that on the inside, but I'm going to use invisible thread out here on the outside, so you really won't be able to see the stitching of where I've sewed that pocket onto the inside. So that's something that I will add. This is probably one of those things where I keep thinking we're going to be done with this series, and then I just keep thinking of more things to show you. I do want to do a quick little demo of this piping. Like I said, there are several videos on tensisters.com. That's our website, that are the tutorials that are demoing piping, because we're actually going to make our piping. I use a nice nylon cord. It doesn't shrink, it doesn't stretch. You want to make sure that cord is nice and round. You can get this at the hardware store. We're essentially making mini piping. This is not a real thick home deck type piping. You can certainly use a cotton cording. I just prefer using the nylon because it holds its shape so well. So on a quilt, for instance, the edge of my quilt that I have added piping to before I bind it is very secure. It's not going to shrink. It's not going to stretch. I've added piping around scallops before I have done the binding, and it just really helps that quilt hold its shape. So that's the one I prefer. So we're going to make our piping with about 1.5 inch strip. This does not need to be on the bias. In fact, a lot of times I prefer it not, because I don't want it to have a lot of give. But I have used some leftover bias binding to make piping. You just want to be aware that there's a lot more stretch if your strip is cut on the bias. So that nylon cord is going to be in the center. You're going to use your zipper foot, just like we've got snapped on the machine. I'm not going to demo the sewing part, but just as a quick reference, you're going to have your strip. We don't fold it in, we don't press it in half, it's just folded in half. And we're going to lay our cording in there. The zipper foot is going to butt up against the cord. I'll show you right here. So that zipper foot butts up against the cording. Now again, this might look different than your zipper foot, but the same principle applies, where the foot butts up against the cord, and then you're going to move your needle over so that the needle is butting up right next to the cording. And so you don't want to go so far that you're sewing on top of the cording. And so you'll get a feel for it. And so then you're going to just sew your seam, and now you've got this really nice piping. But when you want to add piping to the edge of your quilt or your jacket before you sew binding, if we back up and just talk about our traditional binding, traditionally we're going to sew this binding on with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So if you want to add piping to your project before you bind it, then what you need is piping with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And 25 years ago, I was trying to do this very thing by just laying a regular ruler over the top of my piping that I made to get a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And I got pretty discouraged and said, I don't think it's worth the time. And so I have made the 10 Sisters piping tool. Let's see, maybe it's this way. I'm not sure if you can even read that here. The 10 Sisters piping tool. This looks like an acrylic ruler, but instead of ruler lines, we have 4 seam allowances, and these are actually grooves in the bottom of the ruler. So the piping tool has 4 different seam allowances. We have 3/8, 5/8, 1/2, and 1/4 inch. So of course 1/4 inch is going to be all of our quilting. 1/2 inch is a home deck seam allowance, 5/8 is garment seam allowance, and 3/8 is heirloom sewing seam allowance. We sell our piping tool a lot to wonderful heirloom sewers because they do a lot of mini piping. And I'm going to actually show you another thing I do with that 3/8 inch. So we are going to cut our piping with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So I've got my little cutting mat here. I've made my piping. I'm going to take that piping tool, and you see how when you lay it over, the cord fits inside that groove. And then you just take your, get it here where I'm going to start, and then you just take your rotary cutter and you're just going to cut off that excess. And so now what you've got is piping with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And so we're going to add that to the edge of our quilt or the edge of our jacket, and you're going to sew the piping on, and then we're going to add binding next. And I would encourage you to go watch the full video, the full demo on how to really use that piping tool. I just want to show you real quickly. You can actually do a double row. So I made my piping, and instead of a 1/4 inch seam allowance, I cut out the 3/8 inch seam allowance, added that to my quilt, made another piping, and cut it with the 1/4 inch. So I'm sewing the first one down, and then I put the next one down, and see how they butt right next to each other, raw edges match. And so I don't try to sew them both on at the same time. I do sew them on separately. I sew them on with a longer stitch length, and then we're going to add that binding to it. So essentially this is kind of like every other technique that hopefully you are watching from me, is that it is something that looks like you've done something hard, but it was actually really easy. And so it's a great finish. And I put this on so many of my quilts because it not only gives you that really nice pop of color, but like I was saying before, it really secures the edge of that binding, and it really gives you a really nice substantial binding. So I am going to finish up this quilted jacket, and then maybe we will do one more quick video and just show you all the jackets that we have finished so far. You know, there's so many fun different options that I'm not sure if I'm gonna ever stop making these jackets. In fact, I think my next jacket project is gonna be one for someone little, so a little child-sized jacket. And so I think that's going to be really super fun. So thank you so much for watching our video today. Every one of the videos has links that should hook you up with 10sisters.com. Our YouTube channel is 10 Sisters TV. And so you can find all the different videos of our jacket series. We love your comments. And, we always love to see pictures of your projects, but we love your comments and your questions. And because as a quilting teacher, that is why I'm here. I am here to learn and pass on all the things, all the mistakes I've made so you don't have to. And so I hope that you will subscribe and click the notification bell. And again, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time on 10 Sisters TV.